I sometimes communicate with the mastodons I've got out here lying under the mud. I've helped to dig one up. I said, "You're only 13,000 years old, but where's your family? Where's your life? Is this all I have left?" I think there will be elephants in the next century, but I'm scared for the future.
The Asian elephant, embodiment of the boundless powers of the Buddha, noble, gentle, and wise. The elephant symbolizes the calm majesty of one on the path to enlightenment.
I think one of the things that draws people to elephant is similarities that we see between the way they are and the way we are.
They have to remember what kinds of interactions they have with different animals. They have long-lived bonds. There's a great deal of cooperation and interdependence in these animals.
ทุกช้างค่ะเวลาเขามาอยู่ด้วยกันเขาจะมีการปรับเปลี่ยนพฤติกรรมเขาจะรักถึงแม้เขาจะเกลียดกันมาก่อนเขาก็รักกันมากพอหลังจากที่เขามาอยู่ด้วยกันแล้วช้างตัวเมียน่ะถึงจะรักกันเป็นศัตรูกันก็กลับมาเป็นเพื่อนกันแล้วเขาก็จะมีการผลิตน้ำนมเพื่อช่วยเหลือลูกช้าง
An elephant is social. An elephant is whole life and well-being is essentially contingent upon social interactions and living communally.
They're like people, but nicer.
How do we sense their intelligence? How is it that people seem to be aware that here there is someone really worth knowing? Here behind the bars of the cage, scarcely moving, in that huge leathery body, there is a mind.
When we first introduced the elephants to the mirror, they really spent the initial amount of time exploring. Once we saw that the animals were using the mirror in ways that looked self-directed, they were showing what we call exploratory and contingency testing behaviors, as they were testing the effects of their own movement in front of the mirror. Then we went on to do what's called the mark test, which is you mark them with children's face paint, and on the other side of their forehead with the same paint, but it was invisible. So we could control for the fact that they weren't just responding to what it felt like or what it smelled like. here is happy from the mirror's point of view. She only touched the part of her body that was marked. That was very compelling evidence that she could recognize this physical representation in the mirror as being herself, that face in the mirror was hers.
Besides elephants, only the great apes, bottle-nosed dolphins, and ourselves are known to be self-aware. 3 species of elephants inhabit Earth. 2 roam sub-Saharan Africa and number in the hundreds of thousands. A third is far less numerous and lives in parts of Asia, with Thailand at the heart of its range.
If things keep going the way they are, then essentially within a fairly short space of time, you're going to have no elephants left in Thailand. Now, I don't think many people would dispute that.
With Asian elephants so frequently starring in our cartoons, kids' books, circuses, and zoos, it's easy to imagine that they're plentiful. In fact, there are only some 35,000 alive today, with half of them in captivity. In Thailand, barely 1,500 Asian elephants survive, less than 1% of their population a century ago. Few enough to squeeze into a single city block.
They have lost tremendous habitat. They live now only on a fraction of the land and the landscapes that they once inhabited.
Estimates predict that by 2050, when Asia's human population will have doubled to nearly 4 billion, the Asian elephant will be completing its decline in the opposite direction, becoming effectively extinct.
The Asian elephants present a special situation because they've been domesticated over 3,000 years. And so people know them differently.
In 2005, more than 13 million tourists visited Thailand. The boom has meant a new role for elephants in a brand of ecotourism called trekking. But camps often misrepresent themselves as elephant conservation centers, when in reality, they are highly profitable businesses that benefit from a tight supply of the valuable animals. Calves are the real prize. Their street value now exceeds $30,000 apiece, creating a demand that often leads to the poaching of a tiny wild population. Frequent trading means that few elephant families ever stay intact.
People want to have an experience with them. They think, oh, elephant riding, that would be nice, we'll get to see the elephants. And they may enjoy it, but they still don't realise, I'm sure, if they knew the training the elephants had gone through and what real elephants sort of lived like, then they'd be horrified about what they were doing.
The relationship between the human and the elephant is based on this incredible power differential where the human is imposing physical or psychological pain in order to control the elephant.
Until recently in Thailand, elephants were nothing more than heavy machinery used to haul logs, a fate they still suffer in neighboring Burma. Now, serving only tourists, the Thai elephants' work has changed. But their training is as brutal as ever.
The way that the elephants have been viewed, have been used for a long time in Thailand, in Asia, in this part of the world, is really detrimental to the elephant's health, welfare, mental state. So every elephant that's come here has come with a lot of baggage.
One woman has dedicated her life to making a difference within a sanctuary called the Elephant Nature Park.
I find it really hard to describe Lek in a few words. This woman is probably one of the most amazing, dedicated, passionate women I've ever met. In her heart, all she wants is for these animals to be taken care of and well looked after. She is completely focused on making a change for these animals to provide education for Thais and for Westerners. She's come up against a lot of opposition, which in a lot of cases would stop people or turn them off, but yet she is dedicated to fighting this cause.
เริ่มต้นทำงานเกี่ยวกับช้างเนื่องจากเริ่มแรกคุณปู่เป็นหมอยาสมุนไพรแล้วหลังจากนั้นตอนที่ไม่มีชีวิตเหมือนกับทาสสายตาความวิงวอนของความช่วยเหลือจากช้างมันติดตามดิฉันมาตลอดก็เลยสัญญากับตัวเองว่าวันหนึ่งเมื่อตัวเองได้มีโอกาสทำอะไรก็ตามจะทำงานเพื่อช้างแล้วนั่นก็คือสิ่งที่จุดประกายให้ตัวเองเข้ามาทำงาน
Situated on just 75 acres, the park is a lifeboat for some of Thailand's luckiest elephants. In spite of a shoestring budget, Lek has rescued 30 imperiled animals. As a conservation model, Lek's program works. The elephants quickly adapt and are now breeding. And training using positive reinforcement is far more effective than beatings.
It was my 21st birthday coming up, and for my brother's 21st, my parents had bought him a car. So I knew they were considering spending around the car price range on my birthday, but I can't drive and I was living in Thailand. So I was sort of talking to them on the phone and writing to them saying perhaps instead I could have the money to go towards buying an elephant. And at first I thought maybe I'd been brainwashed by some organisation. But then eventually I got them to come out and they saw the park and met Lek and they understood completely.
There are only a handful of places like this in Asia. But if they grow in size and number, they represent a real beacon of hope in an otherwise stormy future.
ไม่ต้องถูกล่ามโซ่ไม่ต้องถูกบังคับให้ใช้งานอีกต่อไปแต่อยากให้เขาได้รู้สึกว่าเขามีครอบครัวได้อยู่กับกลุ่มของเขาได้มีชีวิตตามธรรมชาติต่อไปนี่สิ่งคือดิฉันตั้งใจไว้ว่าวันหนึ่งเนี่ยถึงยังไงดิฉันก็จะเริ่มงานทำงานนี้ตลอดไปค่ะ
Allowing the elephants to gather into social groups has had miraculous effects. After some time in a threat-free and supportive environment, it's no surprise that even the most troubled arrivals begin to act like elephants again. The Elephant Nature Park clearly offers a better life to some of Thailand's elephants. But sadly, big profits still provide incentives for doing things the old way. And unless countries find ways to change that equation, saving elephants and land for them will remain a job done day by day, one elephant at a time.
Pretty much every time you see an elephant that's just had a wash, the first thing they'll do afterwards is throw dust or sand or something like that to cover themselves up. Elephants are very prone to sunburn, can be fatal, particularly in domestic situations where they will be sometimes chained or left out in the sun. It also keeps the insects off.
In this camp, the elephants are allowed to be elephants. They don't have to give rides, they don't have to do painting, they don't have to play musical instruments. The beauty of it is you just see them being elephants in their, well, not their natural habitat, but in natural social groups, and they're happy. You can see, for anyone who's spent a little bit of time with elephants, you can see like in their eyes and in their whole attitude, they're not scared, they're just free.
Every elephant besides the very youngest that's here has an extremely traumatic, abusive past. Some come with incredible physical injuries, like Meadow with her broken back from just a ridiculous situation that was created by people. The list goes on, so they all have heartbreaking stories.
There's a kind of a behavior which is called stereotypy, where it's repeated behavior. It is often observed in individuals of all species who are under severe hardship, typically in captivity. They reflect so much of the things that we admire and that we seek to be. And so in that sense, the elephant offers sort of a conundrum. If they're so much like us, then how can we subject them to the kind of cruelty that we do? We can now, from neurosciences, really talk about elephants and humans in the same way. We just have never thought of it. It is considered more normative to see an animal behind bars. It's more normative to see an animal in isolation. But we have to understand that an elephant is defined by their environment. They're defined by their social interactions and their family.
I think an elephant left by itself is barely an elephant. It's just something completely missing in their lives that's hugely important to their existence. Their whole life is geared around their family, around their babies, around their aunties, around their sisters and brothers.
The calves are the treasure of the herd, and they are treated as treasures of the herd. Many people have said the matriarch makes most of the decisions in an elephant group. It's my impression that the youngest calf makes most of the decisions, and the matriarch supports them.
An elephant mother's investment in her young easily rivals a human mother's. A female elephant will only give birth once every 4 or 5 years. Pregnancy lasts 22 months and is followed by several years of nursing and care.
The females stay with their moms for long periods of time, and they watch child rearing, they watch their siblings and assist with their siblings being raised. So you've got generations of animals that are together. We have evidence for what we call enculturation, learning from observation, learning the ways of the animals that are in your social group.
Much of human social complexity is tied to the ability to communicate. While not as elaborate as our own, studies by Katie Payne and others show that elephant communication is remarkably varied, full of nuance and meaning.
One of the things that surprised me first off was the amount of vocalizations that they make, the range of vocalizations, the amount that they talk to each other, and the apparent uses of the vocalizations was just so much more complex than I imagined.
The vocalizations of elephants seem to have specific meanings. In many cases, they certainly convey emotion. Elephants are at least as emotional as human beings. And I, in my attempts to interpret and translate elephant calls, have often come to the point where I've said, well, this is just an expression of enormous emotion.
This is Jokia. We rescued Jokia from the logging.
She had been used in logging, and she had lost her baby and had become extremely distraught. So she basically lay down and refused to work. Now, I can't say exactly what they would have done to her to get her to work, but it wouldn't have been pretty. And we do know that they did use slingshots, and one of her eyes was damaged. But she continued to refuse to work, so they sold her off to some other owners, who she also refused to work for. And they used the same approach and took out the other eye. Lek and some friends came across her and heard about her, and so a bunch of people pooled their money together and bought her for Lek and brought her here.
Now she have a friend named Mepum to look after and taking care of her.
So May Perm, who's already here, sort of adopted her, and since that time they've been absolutely inseparable. Sometimes May Perm might wander off for some reason, and then you'll hear Jokia give a little rumble or a call, and May Perm will come tearing, screaming back. You know, it happens 2 or 3 times a day, but it's like they've just met after 50 years and they're touching each other and squeaking and caressing each other. It's really, really beautiful to watch.
Their societies and families mirror our own. They possess intelligence and self-awareness unmatched by all but a few of Earth's species. And yet, in one human generation, Asian elephants may be no more.
Wildlife is considered a luxury, but it's not a luxury, but it's considered a luxury. And it will be ever more so as the situation gets worse and worse for it.
Just to sort of say, well, there's too many of us and we all need somewhere to stay, so I'm sorry, there's nothing left for the elephants. It's kind of our responsibility, I think, given that we're the ones spreading across the planet and taking all the land, to put something aside for all the other animals that live here.
We have to protect these animals. We have to do the right thing. And I really want to be part of the generation that does that right thing. I don't want to turn around one day and look at my daughter or grandchildren and say, we didn't do it.
Enlightenment is more a journey than a destination. As fellow travelers on the path, we should not be alone.